today, and I saw what the topic was, and when Jennifer and I talked about it, I thought, wow, is that really going on? And so I know in this room, I'm looking at the parents in this room, and whether you realize it or not, I see you all the time, because I'm at Laura's, who is my senior daughter's choir events or something, or we kind of came up together in scouting, and your Valley Oaks parents or Spring Branch Middle School parents. So I've seen you, a lot of you, and I know that you are not the parents who I need to be talking to about these issues. I know that the parents that I need to be talking to are not in the room. But when you come across them, and you know, and the thing is, hey, there's a party at my house, and what we often don't understand is that our kids are going to parties and events that we don't really know about, right? As Jennifer said, my wife is an officer with Houston Police Department. I was a criminal court judge for 20 years, so I'm convinced that my kids are very sneaky. And they do all the same stuff that everybody else's kids do. They've just figured out better ways to not tell us about it. Because that's what often happens with our kids. Sometimes we just don't know. But for the parents who do know that they're having a party and that their kids are having kids over, I did a segment for a organization called Kids in the House that you can look up online if you want to. It's a California organization that is an online resource tool for parents. You know, they say there's no book for parenting. Well, Kids in the House is a book for parenting. It's a video book of experts from around the nation and around the world that come in and talk about these parenting issues. One of the things that I said when I was on the Kids in the House site was this: the only way you can know what's happening with your children is to talk to your children and listen to your children talk. So we're talking about parties, underage drinking, how you stop that. If you take away one thing from today, please make it this. If you have a pen, write it down. If you have a good memory, memorize it. Responsibility.org. Responsibility.org. It is a website of an organization called the Foundation for the Advancement of Alcohol Responsibility. I spent 15 years on their national and judicial advisory boards. I lectured around the country on these issues to judiciaries, how to stop underage drinking and hardcore drunk driving. Responsibility.org has tools, practical tools for parents to use to talk with their children about how to avoid underage drinking and some of the other issues that we have going on. We're all dealing with these issues. Anyone who's looking at anyone else in the room thinking, God, I wish I had it like her, she's got it tough too, right? If you've got kids, you've got kid problems. Responsibility.org talks about those kids' problems in a meaningful way. One of the people who served with me on that board is a Dr. Deborah Gilboa. She's a consultant for the Today Show. Here's what she says about underage drinking and hardcore drunk driving and drug use with children. As conversations go up, drinking and drug behavior go down. So as we've seen a 73% increase in parents talking to their kids about these issues, we've seen a 50% decrease in the use of alcohol and controlled substances with our youth. Now, because the national media, while they do a good job talking about Juuls and things of that nature, they do it in a way that scares you to death. You've got to talk to your kids in a way that informs you, is not judgmental, and gives them the ability to be honest with you. That doesn't mean that they have to be disrespectful with you, but you want them to be honest. I found that the way that I learned most about what my kids were doing was just driving them to school with their friends. As I sat in the front seat invisible, they talked about everything. You name it, I learned it, right? And I didn't say anything. I just shut my mouth until later. And then I took my moments to make my points. Hey, you know, not every kid drinks. Most kids don't. Not every kid uses Juuls. Most kids don't. If you feel inclined to do so, let me know so we can talk about it. And just moving to this issue of Juuls and vaping, how many people here have ever eaten at a Chipotle? Aside from me. None of us knew what was in that stuff at Chipotle, right? Until it started making everybody sick. It's kind of the same thing with Juuls. We don't know what's in there. And for me and my daughter, that's what I tell her. I don't know what's in it. You don't know what's in it. One, you're too young to use it. It's a crime to do it. It's a crime if they're under the age of legal consent to purchase nicotine and tobacco to supply it to them. So I would encourage you not to do that. I know that a lot of people say, well, I'd rather that they were doing these things in front of me than doing them, secretively with me not around. I think that if you have the right conversations, they won't do either. But it's just a function of having those conversations and telling our friends to have those conversations and letting our kids know, if you have friends who are doing these things, I would rather you not be around them. So, parties. I understand that there are some parents who hold parties and have kids sign liability waivers, saying, hey, if you get drunk and you hurt somebody or pass out and knock your head up against the wall, you can't sue us. Those contracts are valid in no place. Those contracts are not valid. Minors cannot sign a valid contract, and no one can sign a contract for an illegality. In Texas or any place, it is illegal to supply alcohol to minors. So any contractual relationship you enter into them to excuse your liability isn't worth the paper that it's written on, except that it is very useful in the lawsuit against you later, right? Because now there's proof positive that you were supplying alcohol to minors. And if you have a homeowner's insurance policy, as we all do who own homes, your homeowner's insurance can be attached. If you have the supplemental policy, me and my wife went out and got one of these umbrella policies, and it occurred to me that's just more money for me to be sued for. But if you have that can be tapped to its limits. If you're supplying alcohol to minors, that is a crime. Save and accept that you can provide alcohol to your child if you want to in an appropriate setting. I cannot imagine why you would want to. Every piece of valid research shows that the younger a person starts drinking, the greater the likelihood that they will develop substance use issues. And I've heard so many parents, well, they do it in Europe. I don't know any Europeans that do it. Well, I would rather that they were doing it here with me and that they learned how to use alcohol appropriately. I've been drinking for 40 years every day, and I don't have a problem. Well, maybe we need to talk about what constitutes an alcohol problem. But all of the research that you'll see in places like responsibility.org and places like Students Against Dumb Decisions, they changed their name from Students Against Drunk Driving to Students Against Dumb Decisions. Mothers Against Drunk Drivers, all of the research, all of the data, all of the credible peer-reviewed studies will tell you that underage drinking leads to slower brain development, leads to greater chances of long-term alcohol substance use and abuse. I did some research because I was given a talk about these issues, specifically marijuana at the time. And people say, well, marijuana is a gateway drug. And I'm not downplaying the significance of using marijuana. I just want to talk about what is a gateway drug to what. The number one drug that marijuana is a gateway to, alcohol. The number one substance that alcohol is a gateway to, everything else. Everything else. Opioids, narcotics, all of those other things, because you have diminished intellectual capabilities when you've been drinking. Any of those of you who have imbibed the once or twice that you have. I made up the difference, I promise you. I went to Southwest Texas State. You know that when your mind is diminished, your likelihood to do other things is increased. So those are my warning shots on alcohol. More conversations lead to less drinking. Lisa touched on something I want to talk about for just a second, and that is the inability of the police to write Class C tickets in a high school setting. And I read the law on this. I read the two pieces of legislation. I will say this, the way I read it, they can do it, we don't want them to. It is bad policy. What was happening was that kids were being criminalized in the school context. And that is bad public policy. And it hurts the kids who are ticketed, and it hurts the kids who are later the children of those kids, because it keeps them from opportunities. You can't legislate good conduct, but you can teach it. You can teach it. And the way that you teach it in the school setting is with in-school suspension, is with, as one parent suggested, counseling, is with treatment, is with group meetings that deal with either nicotine use or alcohol use or drug use. What I don't think we want to do, and what I saw all too often in the criminal justice system, is the criminalization of being a kid. We all remember being kids and people doing stupid stuff. The difference, there but for the grace of God go I, for them than for us, is at the time when we grew up, our teachers knew our parents, would tell our parents, and our parents would do something about it. Now, those conversations often lead to defensive posturing by the parent, as opposed to offensive conduct to stop the behavior. And I'm going to segue into this last thing, and then I'll sit down. I've talked with Lisa a lot about various issues, and I love going over there because her door is always open. When she's not doing 100 different things, she's always willing to talk to you, and she's always doing 100 different things, but she makes time. We have incidents that happen at this school, and I'm relating this to the issue of talking about things at home. Lisa can't raise your kids. The teachers can't raise our kids. We've got to raise our kids and then send them to school with enough common sense not to do things that are seen as bullying or offensive or hurt the feelings of others or amount to criminal conduct in the schools. Having teachers in the bathroom, we don't want that. We don't want to turn our schools into mini prisons, because then it makes school less fun for the children. It makes learning more difficult to do. And so when you're talking to the parents who are not in this room, I would ask you to have with them what I'm asking you to have with your kids: conversations. Conversations that let them know that you are concerned if you see that they're the ones sponsoring the parties, that they're doing these things, and why you won't let your kid attend, and how much you value their friendship, but you can't excuse their behavior. Those are tough conversations to have, but they're the kind of grown-up conversations that we have to change what's happening in our community. So, thank you for the opportunity to stand on this soapbox and preach to the choir. As I talk to the people in this room, I know that the problems I'm talking about aren't with you. Please understand that I realize that. But I also realize, having been in church a lot, the choir needs a sermon too. Sometimes we just need to be bolstered and encouraged in doing the right thing. So be not weary in well doing, for in due season you'll reap. Thank you. Oh, hey, do you have any questions?
Actually, I do.
Yes.
I was at Walgreens the other day, and there was this young-looking man, and they said, "I need to see your ID to buy tobacco." And they beeped it. I'm like, "Oh, that's good. You do that with people that look underage." I go, "No, we do that with everybody."
They do it with everyone.
Well, why can't there be some legislature put in place that any place that sells tobacco products must scan the ID, or it cannot be sold?
That should be the case. That should be the case, and our legislature needs to hear from the parents who make that a priority and make those stores make it a priority. They card me for stuff, and I know I look old.
Yeah, I went to Southwest Texas too.
See, that's the reason I look old. Yes, ma'am.
My kids don't want to do parties in my house because they say it's not cool because I'm going to be there.
Yes. No, in fact, it doesn't. And one of the things that my wife and I did before we had kids was talk about what we were gonna do when we had kids and how we were gonna raise them, right? And so one of the things we discussed was allowing our kids to go to anyone's house who we hadn't met. And so we don't. If we have not spoken to the other parents and they don't know that a party's going on at that house, my kids don't go. And they don't go into that house because I wanna know everyone's house they walk into, personally. Yes.
Okay, so what if you do have a party at your house, an innocent party, and you have kids that, whether they've been invited or not invited, show up and they choose to sneak alcohol into your house?
The last time I had this discussion, I had that same question asked. You can't account for everything, but you are responsible for everything that happens under the roof of your house. And so whatever it is that you have to do to ensure that those activities aren't going on in your home, you gotta do those things. But mostly, let your kids know, right? Because your kids are gonna be your best defense. They're gonna be the ones that let you know, hey mom, someone's got alcohol here, they need to go. Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
Is there any legal implication if your kids have friends who come to your house who are already drunk and you let them spend the night instead of going home or telling their parents?
I would do both and, as opposed to either or. I would let them spend the night and sleep it off and tell their parents, hey, your kid showed up here drunk. Now, does that make you a cool parent? Probably not, but I'm not concerned about being a cool parent. That has never been a concern of mine. I think as my kids get older, I seem cooler to them. But at this stage, when I seem uncool, I'm cool with that. I don't think it's illegal to let them sleep it off. I think as long as their parents know where they are and you're not harboring a fugitive or a runaway or something, right? Because there are laws against that when there are certain ages that you can't harbor a runaway. But you just want to make sure that you let folks know. Yeah. I would want to know if my daughter showed up. If my daughter shows up at anyone's house drunk, I want to know about that. Okay. Yes, ma'am. Hey.
Hey, I'd like to extend the scope of your discussion for a moment. What do we need to be aware of for supplying alcohol for over 21? If we have a party and we're supplying alcohol, so if we need to know about it.
I think a lot of the same things, what they call dram shop liability or server's liability. There are so many devices now, and the company that I work for, CST and ToxLock, is an interlock company. An interlock device is a device that's installed in the vehicle of persons who are convicted of driving while intoxicated and keeps them from starting the vehicle if they've consumed too much alcohol. There are devices that you can get for parties that are not that expensive, that a person can blow into and determine what their alcohol concentration is. I think most of us as responsible adults, and I know you, so I know you are, you're not gonna overserve, or you're gonna hope that you're not over-serving. But if you know the cues to look for, right? Slurred speech, stumbling, these sorts of things, you're keeping an eye out for your guests, you're making sure you greet them as they leave the door, to see that they're not so intoxicated that they can't leave your home safely, then, let them know and be insistent about them not driving the vehicle.
Am I in any way responsible if they do go and do
You
that?
can be, yes. If somebody leaves your home intoxicated and hurts somebody, they can trace the liquor that they were drinking back to you. Yes, ma'am. That's been in the news lately. Yes, ma'am.
Could you address then, if you have a party that has adults and children, what the policy is if you serve alcohol?
I would say don't serve alcohol to children ever.
Yes, no, I'm saying, there's something about, like, if you have, let's say, it's a high school graduation party, and
Right.
you have alcohol for adults, and you don't plan on serving it to children or underage, but isn't there something that you have to have some protections in place that a child can't, an underage teenager can't walk up?
There were,
Be held liable.
right. You don't want to have a kid able to have access to the alcohol in your home, because that once again presents an immediate problem. That gets so much more murky, especially if the kid's parents are there and say that it's okay for the child to drink in their presence. Things things get really murky there. So you asked a huge question in a very short period of time. My personal position as a person who owns a home and consumes alcohol, if an adult wants to drink alcohol in my home, I will let them drink alcohol in my home. I'll serve it to them up to the point that I think that they've had too much, or I know they have to drive home, at which point I'm gonna argue for them to take an Uber, Lyft, or just stay. If they have children with them, especially children under the age of 18, I'm gonna tell them that it's a felony to ride around in your car with your child after you've been consuming alcohol. And if you're over the legal limit, that can result in a felony charge. So, you know, I am a buzzkill. Because I'm gonna educate as much as I can, right? I'm gonna go back here and then I'm coming right back up here. Yes, ma'am.
The adult party, if you have a catering service with an alcohol license that serves alcohol, is that maybe responsibility?
If I'm a lawyer suing the people, it just gives me someone more to sue, right? It gives me another deep pocket to go after. Yes.
Just to go back to your statement then, so you said if you consumed alcohol, you can't have a child in the car?
If you've had so much alcohol to drink that you've lost the normal use of your mental and physical faculties, you cannot transport a minor. Now,
You're under a limit.
right, right, and so, all right, it's law school. So in Texas, the legal limit, the per se legal limit for intoxication is 0.08, milliliters of alcohol in your body, and there's a formula that's done to determine what that is. Basically, for a 150-pound man, and I say man because muscular differences exist, there's more body water with women, and so it takes less alcohol for women to feel the effects of alcohol than it does a man. So for a standard height, 5'9" 150-pound man, 0.08 is approximately 5 drinks within a 1 hour period. Okay, so it's about 0.02 per drink. So that's 4.5, 5 drinks in an hour. To stay at a 0.08, you would have to continue to consume enough alcohol to stay there. What is a drink? Then becomes the question, is it the one I pour, or is it a standard drink? It's a standard drink. So a standard drink is a 5-ounce glass of wine, a 12-ounce bottle of beer, and I'm not talking about your craft stuff, I'm talking about your Miller Lite, Budweiser, whatever, about 5.4% alcohol by volume, or a standard shot of 80 proof spirits. That's one drink. Now, when most people pour a drink, they pour 3, right? Because if you're pouring a decent sized bottle of a glass of whiskey, you're not measuring 1.5 ounces. You're pouring a few fingers worth, and it may be 3 fingers worth, and the next thing you know, you've got 3 drinks. You pour another one of those, you just had a 6-pack. You drink a Long Island iced tea, you had a 6-pack. So people will say, I only had 1 drink. No. You had 1 glass. With a lot of drinks in it. And you go to Chewy's, it's the same thing. You get one of them big giant margaritas or whatever that they have, the swirls. That's a lot of liquor to drink. And so you have to be careful, and people think, well, I can have 6 swirls. No. 2 maybe, and then you really need to take an Uber. So that's how that works. Yes, ma'am.
Can you talk about, if there's students at a party, let's say there's no parents, maybe some kids are drinking, some kids aren't drinking, party gets busted for whatever reason, sometimes they're busted just because the kids are operating poorly in the street,
Mhm.
the neighbors can't get back. So what are the repercussions of in school and out of school for the students, whether they're drinking, not drinking, whatever, or are there any?
Well, okay, so those are good questions. Are there in-school consequences for out-of-school behavior? There can be. Spring Branch ISD has a website that lays out their disciplinary policies in great detail. And someone asked earlier, what can get you suspended versus expelled versus in-school suspension? They lay all of that out for you. And you can get that website information, I'm sure, from Ms. Weir. I don't have it at the top of my head, but I did pull it up and I read it, because I wanted to know what those things were too. And it's a little convoluted to read, but you can get all of that information. With respect to having a party at your house where you are not there, your kid's having a party where you're not there, never let that happen, would be my advice. If there's gonna be a party at your house, you should be there. And if your kids say, I don't want you there, then there's a reason for that. That is not acceptable. And kids just aren't gonna tell me how to run my house, right? If you're gonna have your friends over, I'm gonna be there. If your kids are gonna have their friends over, you should be there. That doesn't mean that you have to be walking around sniffing everybody's breath, but you wanna make sure that stuff you don't want happening in your home isn't happening in your home. That's reasonable.
Well, I have a question. What's
Yeah.
the liability if they pull a 16 candles and the parents go out of town overnight and they have no idea anyone's even at their house? What's the liability at
I've
that
never
point?
left, see, I tell you, I'm a buzzkill. I've never left my kids alone
Yeah, I
at
haven't
home. I've never left my teenage kids at home alone, because I've seen too many movies like 16. So when I leave overnight, my wife is with me, and our kids stay in town, another adult comes over to supervise. Or they go to a sister's house, or my parents come to town and watch. Yes,
So, I think you addressed this earlier, but just to clarify, so like senior parties,
yes,
that take place at a venue, and, everyone's signing those liabilities that these parents come up with, you're saying those have no bearing at all.
none.
But there are adults there, so parents are having cocktails, and let's say the bartender of the establishment gives the kid a drink. Are the parents who are hosting that party liable, or is it the venue?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes to all, because the venue should take better care to hire bartenders who card the patrons. The parents should not supply alcohol to a minor. There's just liability on top of liability on top of liability there.
So both are in trouble, or could be.
The venue, the parent, and I would say the bartender if he's an independent contractor. Yes, ma'am.
What do you think about these, heard that fake IDs that the kids are ordering from China that look like a real ID?
I haven't seen one, I hope. But you know what? We did it. We did it. And so you gotta be careful, you gotta watch it. Yeah, you gotta watch out. You gotta watch out.
They look real with their own picture on it, and they're going and using it to go.
They are, and
bowling alley on half price drink day or whatever.
they are. And that may be a defensive issue for the person who sold them the alcohol. But personally, I've never seen a 16-year-old who looks like a 21-year-old. There are friendly liquor stores around here though. And we know who they are. Because we see other people's kids in them buying booze when we're in there getting out. And when you see that, let them know and turn them in. I'm not advocating, I know I'm in the church, I probably should. I'm not advocating teetotaling. I'm just saying we have to be responsible about how we use, consume, and address the issue of alcohol with our children, because it's so important. Every year, drunk driving kills 11,000 people. That's the same number of students in the average class across the street, every day, dying in drunk driving classes, and driving crashes, every day, 30 students worth of people, a classroom size, dead, over something that's 100% preventable. That's why I'm selling interlocks.
I would say, and also just, because it goes on, and these kids do have fake IDs, and there are parents that are gonna sign, they say they don't sell alcohol, and the kids bring it in, and that's we didn't know.
Right.
Tell your kids to take Uber, pay for an Uber, no questions asked. You want an Uber ride, you take an Uber.
And you don't want to, you don't want to be the parent who winks and nods and take, but yes, put your kids, everyone, I would think, would wanna have their kids on their Uber account. Because you never know what legitimate things are going to happen. And so I have my daughters on mine, especially my college-age daughter. And we talk to her about drinking. Don't drink and drive. Please don't consume alcohol, and don't ever leave your drink sitting around, and walk away from it. I don't care how good a girlfriend you got with you. She's not gonna watch your drink like you would. Don't leave your purse laying around. Don't let people in your car who you don't know because you don't know what they have on them. Don't let anyone pull out drugs in your car and you not stop and put them out. Those are hard things to do and hard lessons to teach, but ultimately we gotta teach them. And so I would rather pay for an Uber for my kid who's in college and had too much to drink than pay for a funeral or a DWI. Yes,
I have
ma'am.
one more question, this has nothing to do with the drinking thing, but kids who are under 18 driving, how much are they sticklers about having more than one kid in your car that you're not related to?
I hope not very. But you know, I haven't, my wife is a police officer. I haven't heard her talk much about that. But if it looks like there's a bunch of kids in the car, jamming out and driving recklessly, and everybody's on their phone texting each other in the car, including the driver, and that leads to it being pulled over, that's going to be a problem.
Right, but if it, when it's like, I have someone in my family who's a wolf follower, and they're like, they only want one person in that car, I'm like, that's so crazy,
I think it's a good rule to follow.
Yes.
I do. I understand, and it's a decision you have to make for your kids. My daughter gets to carry one other person around with her. She's 16. She is a really good driver, except she's 16. And 16-year-olds, 17-year-olds, 18-year-olds, they're so easily distracted. Where you can talk to someone and watch the road at the same time, they will talk to a person and have to make eye contact. There's still that road out there and all those people on it, but they're looking over here, talking to their buddy. Arguments about what's gonna play on the radio, all of these things. They're just things, they're unnecessary distractions. We managed to survive it, but I understand the rule. I get it. All right, everyone, thank you very much. I appreciate it.